Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto finds Kushina after 18 years and she falls in love with him part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this and comment for next part. And now let's start the fanfic. A man sat upon a boulder in Konoha's training ground 8. He was seated in an Indian position. His legs crossed underneath him with his back stiff as a board. His arms stretched out down his legs so his wrists rested on his knees. His hands were in an odd shape. His forefinger and thumb were pressed together to make a circular shape. His middle, ring and pinky were pointing straight away from his hands as he sat motionless. His outfit marked him as a shinobi for any who came across the area. His dark gray shirt sticking to his chiseled chest. His six-pack on display even though he was clothed. His muscles rippled as he took a deep breath filling his broad chest. On his right arm, his Hitai-8 stood proudly displayed as it gleamed in the sunlight, its black cloth hanging down to his waist. On his waist, a burnt orange-colored sash was wrapped with the extra length hanging down the boulder showing it would hang to the man's knees if he were to be standing. On his legs, a dark gray pair of pants lay covering his legs. His feet had on a sandal and boot combination which provided maximum protection for his feet during taijutsu but also provided a comfortable fit. The features that were most prominent for this shinobi however were on his head. Atop his head, a mop of spiky blonde hair swayed in the wind as it caught the sunlight gleaming almost as bright as his Hitai-8. His eyes were closed but everyone knew that those eyes were as deep and as blue as the ocean his name hinted at. Finally, the lower half of his face was covered by a black face mask much like his previous sensei, but underneath it, lay 6 whisker marks that marked him as the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. After the pain attack, Tsunade had awoken to attend the 5-cage meeting. After Naruto had encountered Sasuke again, Naruto had traveled to Kumo himself with the help of the toads. He went alone and confronted Kurabi, or Killer Bee. The only other Jinchuriki in the world after Akatsuki had managed to hunt all but those 2 down. He had, with quite a bit of his usual attitude, managed to convince Kurabi it was best that they attend to the front lines and attacked Akatsuki's main base with just the 2 of them. Before their attack, the 5 cages had been discussing what to do about the Akatsuki threat when Madara Uchiha managed to inform them of his Moonzai plan. After Madara had left, the cages had decided to hide away Kurabi and Naruto to avoid the Akatsuki getting their hands on them. Little did they know, their efforts would be futile. Kurabi and Naruto had managed to easily dispatch Zetsu leaving only Kisame and Madara as opponents since Team Taki had not been at the base. Kurabi had easily defeated Kisame after overloading his Infamor Samahata sword. The sword was meant to eat chakra and managed to eat away 5 of Kurabi's 8 tails before overloading itself and being poisoned by the Yuki it had absorbed. Without his main weapon, Kisame had managed to put up a very good fight but Kurabi had dispatched him rather readily upon destroying Samahata. Naruto had confronted Madara as soon as he returned from the 5-cage summit. Using his Sage mode, he attempted to defeat Madara. However, it had proven futile as Naruto had not been able to land a single hit. When Madara had been assured of his triumph he played with Naruto and attempted to goad him while stating he was going to destroy Konoha. Naruto had merely smirked as he looked at Madara and revealed his trump card. Naruto had appeared behind Madara in a yellow flash and plunged a Rasenshuriken into Madara's body managing to do the most damage to him since his fight with the Shadaime. Naruto had taken advantage of Madara's moment of weakness and managed to finish off the supposed immortal being. Thus the 4th Shinobi War was averted by the 2 beings that it was to be fought over. Naruto and Kurabi had regrouped only to be assaulted by Suigetsu and Jugo with Sasuke right behind them. As powerful as Team Taki was, they held no chance against Naruto's Hiraishin Jutsu combined with his devastating taijutsu in Sage mode. Both had been knocked unconscious so fast even Sasuke's eyes had trouble keeping up. Kurabi had merely picked the 2 members up as Sasuke attempted to subjugate the Kyuubi within Naruto. Itachi's gift had activated, permanently sealing Sasuke's Mangekyo and leaving him with his normal Sharingan eyesight. Naruto had proceeded to knock him out, and the last two Jinchuriki of the world headed back to Konoha to take the biggest lecture of irresponsibility ever given by their cages. Naruto and Kurabi had simply ignored their talks, as the two were now hailed as heroes within the world. Both had separated, but they were great friends even to this day. Naruto's eyes snapped open as he detected an odd chakra signature near the monument to fallen heroes in his old training ground. He would normally ignore any chakra signatures, but this one felt as strong as his own before he left on his training trip about 5 years ago. That was no small amount, and no one within the village came close to it except Jiraiya, and he was out training the next spymaster so he could retire. He had managed to flee from pain in Omegakure and met back up with Tsunade when Naruto had been attacking Madara. Tsunade had almost sent him back into the grave, but her relief had made her do something she had never done before. She kissed him and told him to never leave her side again. He had happily complied until she gave him a mission to train the next spymaster. He was due back in the village any day now. Naruto's eyes were not his normal blue, however. The orange coloring around his eye along with the yellow iris combined with a horizontal bar for his pupils signified the activation of his Sage mode. He stood up to his impressive full height of 6 feet 2 inches and bounded off into the woods to see who this odd shinobi was. As he traveled the short distance, he wondered why this shinobi would not have Anbu escorts, especially since he or she was not a Konoha shinobi Naruto had met before. He had worked with most Anbu by now, so he was fairly sure he knew almost everyone within the Konoha system. He decided to observe this newcomer before approaching them, his previous battle experiences keeping him from making the mistake his younger counterpart may have done and rushed in introducing himself. He stopped on a tree limb overlooking his old training ground and, suppressing his chakra, spied the lone person standing in front of the monument. He narrowed his eyes as he took in the fully robed figure. The person had its whole body covered in a plain brown cloak, so no one could see any distinguishable features. Though the stance the person took led Naruto to believe this person was female. The way the cloak fell did not lend anything else to the observant eyes of Naruto, but he could pick out the slight bulge of a kunai pouch on her leg along with a sword along her back. Just as he was about to jump forward and confront the woman, she turned around and her eyes locked with his as his breath hitched. Kushina Uzumaki was back in Konoha after 18 years of running away from her horrid past. She stared down at the monument stone depicting the names of many shinobi which had died alongside her in the Third Shinobi War. Her fingers traced the names of many of her friends who had died in battle. Ending on the reason she had left Konoha in the first place, even though it was her home, Minato, she thought as her finger traced the name of the Yondaime Hokage. Theirs had been a secret relationship, but when he had found out she was pregnant, he had been as ecstatic as she. She had kept on the active duty roster as long as possible to make less people suspicious, then was put on maternity leave with only Tsunade knowing of it. Bawako Sarutobi had been her birthing doctor, even though Tsunade mainly took care of her. She had been out of work for about 6 months when she gave birth to their little bundle of joy, Naruto, she thought as she scanned the names on the monument looking for his name. She was sure they would honor the sacrifice he made by giving his life to seal that damned Kyuubi. She knew not why Kyuubi attacked, but she could only curse it to hell as it took both her husband and son from her. She had spent the better part of 18 years running from that damned pervert's spy network so she could live in peace with nothing to bother her. She had managed to settle down about 4 years ago and had been living peacefully until the recent events with Jinchuriki were made public. That was part of the reason she was in Konoha. She had snuck in to see Tsunade and try to get information on how they managed to perfect the sealing of the Kyuubi. Mostly, she was wondering who this hero of Konoha everyone kept talking about was. She had heard many things about him and she was quite interested in who the identity of this person was. She only ever heard of different names, never his actual name, which was quite odd. Her mind returned to the present as she looked down at the stone and realized her son's name was not on the stone. Her anger flared and she was about to stomp off when her sensors kicked in and informed her of her guest. She turned around with fury in her eyes as she stared at the man who was hiding in the tree line. Naruto's breath caught in his throat as his toad sage eyes locked with those furious emerald green eyes. Naruto had never seen such gorgeous eyes on anyone, not even Sakura. He noticed red hair was poking out from the shadows of the hood, but the rest of her face was hidden within the robe's shadows. He stood staring at her for a few moments before she spoke in a clear authoritative tone that had shivers running down Naruto's back, shivers he wished he could forget as he only ever was hurt from them. He shook that thought off quickly as he listened to her voice. "Well?" she asked. Naruto withheld a blush as he realized he had been staring but quickly recovered as he remembered his initial reasoning for being in this field. He appeared next to her in a burst of speed enhanced by his toad sage powers as he towered over her 5 feet 5 inches stature. He crossed his arms and put on his war face, his toad sage eyes becoming seemingly icy. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" he asked. "It is polite to introduce yourself first before asking for a person's name," Kushina retorted. Naruto's eyes narrowed. "Indeed, but not when said person is an invader in your own home. You are not of Konohagakure and I have never seen you before. You have no Anbu guards, which means that, either you are a native, which I already know you are not, or you are someone who snuck into the village," Naruto explained. "So, who are you and what are you doing here?" he asked again. If Kushina was impressed, she didn't allow it to show as she stared into his eyes. Naruto had to consciously tell himself to not fall to her captivating green eyes. She finally asked another question. "If I tell you my name, would you tell me yours?" she asked. "Why would you want to know my name?" he asked. Kushina seemed to hesitate, but she answered, "Judging from what I am seeing, you are the man they call the hero of Konoha, are you not?" she asked. Naruto nodded stiffly. "You intrigue me, I wish to learn more about you," she said honestly. Naruto's eyebrow raised. "So you came here just to get to know me?" he asked with a bit of trepidation. "Not entirely. I want to see some old friends as well," Kushina said, deciding being honest was the best way to go. Naruto nodded. "Very well, if you tell me your name I will tell you mine," he responded. He had learned the advantage of keeping secrets in his fight with Madara. Kushina stared hard at him as if she was trying to tell if he was lying or not before she glanced back at the stone and Naruto saw the previous fury spring back to life in her eyes. "One other question," she said as he nodded. "Why is the previous holder of the Kyuubi not on this monument?" she asked. Naruto cocked his head to the side in confusion. "What previous container?" he questioned. Kushina's face contorted into a scowl as she thought her son's sacrifice had not even been made known, not that Naruto could see it. "My son's name. The previous container for the Kyuubi. He died the night of the attack as the seal did not take on him," she stated vehemently. Naruto's body froze as the implications of what she was saying ran through his mind. Was he the second container? No. The Yondaime had said he was the first. His father had said he was the first. With that suggestion thrown out of the window, Naruto's mind began to run through her entire statement, picking up one word. Son. Could it be possible? Kushina did not miss the stiffening of his body, though she knew not what had caused it. Her fury was palpable in the air as he stood ramrod straight in front of her. "What?" he stated in almost a whisper. "Did you say your name was?" he asked just as quietly. Kushina's fury increased, but she drew herself up to her tallest height and glared at him through her cloak. "Uzumaki Kushina," she said. Naruto felt his mind crash as it attempted to reconcile with the information in front of him. Here stood his birth mother, from all accounts completely fine, and she had been gone. Where had she gone? What has she been doing? Why wasn't she here? All of these questions raced through Naruto's mind as his brain rebooted to accept what was right in front of him. It scared him. It frightened him. He knew not what to do, so he did what he did when he was young and the mobs would come looking for him. He ran. Naruto turned on his heels and dashed from the clearing, his chakra no longer being concealed, flushed over the city, drawing wide eyes from all of his friends. He hadn't done this since his last prank, but he ran and ran until he could run no more. Then he broke down and did something he had promised he wouldn't do again after Jiraiya's supposed death. He cried. He bawled his eyes out to the world as he mourned for something he never had. A mother. Kushina stood shocked at the actions of the man she had just encountered. As soon as she said her name, the man dashed away as if trying to run from her. Then she felt it, a presence so overwhelming she thought she was in the Kyuubi's presence on the night of the attack again. Her sensor blasted her with the impression of 3 different yet same eyes bearing down on her. The first, the same eyes that she had just been staring into, leading her to believe that he was the one with that presence. The second, those same eyes, but his pupils now looked like a skewed cross with slits for the up-down part of the plus sign. The final eyes, ones which had her blasting to her past, were ocean blue eyes that were as deep as the blue they contained. She felt herself tremble under the weight of his presence as he traveled faster than she had ever felt anyone travel. He was a mere blur to even her sensor ability. His massive chakra moved as if he was being chased by the Kyuubi himself. Her mind had frozen upon the image of the final set of eyes staring into her mind. The pain and loneliness reflected in his eyes, freezing her in her place as she attempted to understand why someone who was hailed as one of the most popular people in the world would be lonely. It also struck a chord deep in her heart as she knew what that loneliness was like, as her whole family had been taken from her. She wondered, briefly, why he would react so badly to just her name, but it was quickly erased as she felt the Anbu moving towards her location. She suppressed her chakra again and berated herself that she had allowed her chakra signature out as she used her considerable stealth abilities to sneak further into the village. She slipped past the net of Anbu and other strong chakra signatures that had been rushing around since that man's chakra had washed over everyone. She reached out her sensor to try to find him, but his signature had seemingly disappeared. She felt people heading to his last location, but he had moved so far that they would probably take about an hour just to get to him. She sighed as she felt the last Anbu pass her and head towards the monument she had just been at. She turned and headed to her old apartment. She wasn't sure why, but she had a feeling it was still standing, even taking into account everything that had been done to the village since she left. She traveled discreetly, jumping through the woods until she reached the edge, then she dropped to the ground and walked out of the brush, heading further into the village with no one capable of detecting her aside from that man. She grew frustrated as she walked around in circles within the village. Her apartment was guarded by a signature much like that of that same man. She cursed as she decided to risk it. She wasn't ready to confront Tsunade with the whole village awake right now. She climbed the stairs with the skill of a kunoichi she had gained during her childhood of fighting. Her steps lithe and graceful as she bypassed the creaky wooden stairs to make her seem like a ghost as she made nary a sound while she continued to the top floor of the apartment building. She smirked as she reached the top floor. Still got it, she thought. She walked to the end of the hallway and took out an old key from within her cloak. With the parting of her cloak, one could see she had tight-fitting clothes hugging her curves. The armor would look to be regular Anbu standard in a pitch-black color, with the only color was a splash of red stripes running down the sides of her outfit. She reached forward and unlocked the door. She smiled and opened the door, only to freeze at the sight of the same man standing in front of her from before, though his eyes were no longer horizontal bars with yellow irises and orange coloring. They were the same blue she had seen earlier, causing her body to freeze as his gaze locked with hers. "Who?" the man started to say, only to grab his head as if in pain. Kushina watched as the guy stumbled slightly before his eyes snapped to hers with cold fury but a hint of curiosity underneath. "I believe you should go see Hokage-sama, Kushina-san," he said in a cold voice. Kushina looked slightly taken aback. "I'm not ready to face her just yet. How in the hell did you get here so quickly from where you ran?" she asked angrily. "Why are you even here?" her anger flashing in her green eyes as she glared at Naruto. Naruto's eyes softened a bit as he said, I don't care if you aren't ready. If you don't go see her soon, there could be widespread panic. Kushina looked confused as her anger seemed to fade with his odd statement. As for your other questions, I was always here, and I am here because this is my apartment, he answered with finality. Kushina looked at him incredulously for a second, before she said, Kage Bunshin. Naruto nodded. Boss always leaves one at home in case someone needs something, he replied. This is my apartment, this wouldn't have been given to you. Kushina said. All will be explained when you go talk with Hokage-sama. The clone clutched his head again. If you don't go see her before the boss gets here, this could get quite messy. We aren't known as the most powerful ninja in the elemental countries for no reason, Kushina-san. Please go see Hokage-sama so nothing happens. Kushina looked back outside and noticed there was about an hour until nightfall. I will go see her at nightfall, she said. The clone looked at her for a few moments, then cocked his head to the side as if calculating something or receiving orders. Very well. But you will have to stay in this living room. Boss doesn't trust you, it said. Kushina's eyes narrowed, wondering if she could dispel the clone for distrusting her, but she decided she would show this hero why she was the red-hot-blooded habanero, but decided she would show the original firsthand. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her as she went and sat on the sofa. There was a tense 45 minutes until Kushina said, anger still present in her voice, You never told me your name, she accused. The clone looked at her and smiled under his face mask. No, I guess I didn't. You will learn it soon enough. I don't want you creating a scene when you find out, he said. Kushina's eyes narrowed again. Why would I cause a scene? Even if I did, I doubt it could be as big as when your boss let his chakra go uncontrolled, she retorted. The clone's smile disappeared as it was reminded exactly who this was. You will cause a scene because you will be pissed. I don't think the village can take another chakra signature like yours to go out of control just yet, he retorted, and they both fell into silence until the sun disappeared. Time to go. See you soon, Kushina-san. The clone's tone back to being its icy cold, sending shivers down Kushina's spine. She glared at it as it suddenly disappeared. She sat there a little while longer, debating what to say, when she finally sighed and stood up, heading out to the Hokage Tower. Naruto sighed as he felt his clone dispel. He had finished crying after about 20 minutes. He had never really cried that long since the old man's death. He knew that she was his mother, but she didn't seem to hate him for being a Jinchuriki, so he was curious about her actions. He slipped under the ledge to the Hokage's office. He knew Tsunade would still be in the office, as she always took longer to do the paperwork than should be done. He was curious about what this was going to reveal. He had never asked Tsunade or Jiraiya about his mother, as he had been too absorbed with what was going on with the world then training when he got back that he hadn't even claimed his father's last name yet. That didn't mean he wouldn't hold some resentment over the fact they would neglect to tell him after he had revealed he knew his father. So, he hid his chakra signature, as only he and Jiraiya could do, and settled in to listen to an enlightening conversation between his birth mother, and, though he would never admit it, his mother figure. Kushina snuck past all of the Anbu and made it to the Hokage's door. She reminisced for a few moments, wondering how long it had been since she had seen her old friend. She was curious what the years had done to her. She sighed as she thought of how lax security seemed. She knocked politely on the door, figuring since she had gotten here any remaining Anbu would be dismissed by Tsunade herself once she confronted her. Come in, a tired voice said, Kushina easily recognizing her friend's voice after all these years. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, quickly shutting the door as she looked around the room to notice it hadn't changed much in the almost 2 decades she had been gone. She saw Tsunade's questioning look but did not speak up, as Tsunade had not asked her any questions. She continued scanning the room with her eyes as she counted mentally, 1 behind the bookcase, 2 by the windows, and, there should be 1 more, alright by the door of course, she thought to herself as she picked up the 4 hidden chakra signatures within the room before Tsunade could speak. Who are you? Tsunade said with curiosity in her voice. You might want to make this conversation a bit more private, Hokage-sama, or some serious repercussions could be set in motion by carelessness. Kushina replied in a cold tone. Tsunade's eyes narrowed at the perceived threat. Are you threatening me or my village? She questioned with a hint of anger lacing her voice. That would not be wise, Kunoichi-san, especially since I could snap you like a twig before you could do so again. Kushina smiled under the cover of her cloak. Same old Su-chan, this has something to do with Arashi Kazama, she said. Tsunade's eyes widened as she stared hard at the woman in front of. A few knew that name, and she could count them on one hand. Tsunade waved her hand. Leave us, she said. The four hidden Anbu appeared and bowed before shining away. Tsunade reached under the Hokage's desk and activated the security seals within the room. The walls glowed blue before Tsunade fixed one of her most lethal glares on the woman in front of her. Talk, she said. Naruto cursed his luck, then thanked Kami he and Ero Sennin had placed seals that allowed them to bypass the Hokage privacy seal while on this ledge. Convenient. No, it was a way for their spymasters to be able to help the Hokage without them knowing. The best part was, only someone keyed into the array would be able to use the seal, and currently, only Naruto and Jiraiya were keyed in. The new spymaster would be keyed in once Jiraiya returned. His lips formed into a foxy grin under his face mask. It was good to be a prankster. Kushina's smile never wavered as she looked at her old friend. Now, is that any way to talk to an old friend, Su-chan? Kushina said, her icy tone replaced with a playfulness she hadn't felt in over 18 years. Tsunade's eyes widened. That voice. She hadn't heard that voice in over 18 years. Plus, only one person called her Su-chan. Kushina, she exclaimed. Is that really you? 1,000 scenarios running through her mind as she tried to figure out what was going on. She was supposedly dead. Kushina chuckled slightly as she finally pulled her hood back, revealing her face for the first time. Naruto's, who could still see despite not being in the room, jaw dropped as he beheld the beauty that was Uzumaki Kushina. Her face was angular, no doubt from the intense training she must have done in her absence. Her jawline led upwards to strong cheekbones that ended in a sharp nose. Her eyes were an emerald green that eyed Naruto in just as the first time he managed to glimpse them through her cloak. The light finally reaching them did terrible things to Naruto's self-control. Her hair was a bright red that fell down to her mid-calves. Two bangs framed her face, one side hanging down to her full, luscious red lips. The other was held up by a hair clip, but it only served to enhance her already fair skin. All in all, Naruto could definitely tell why his father could have fallen in love with the angel in front of him. While he may have been dense when he was younger, his current lifestyle, author of the Ika Ika series, forced him to appreciate the female body, leading to him shamelessly admitting that his mother was definitely one of the most beautiful women he had ever seen even without seeing her body. He brushed these thoughts out of his head as he refocused on the conversation between the two kunoichi. Tsunade's own jaw dropped as she beheld how Kushina looked. What the hell? You don't look a day over 20. She accused to the increased chuckling of Kushina. I love the look on your face. Kushina said as her chuckles became full-blown laughter at the incredulous look from Tsunade. Tsunade's face developed a tick mark indicating her anger as she started to growl slightly. Kushina, she said in a low menacing voice, causing Kushina to sober almost instantly as she knew this was going to be an important talk. All right, enough horsing around, I suppose you want an explanation, she said. Getting a curt nod from Tsunade, she better have a good reason for abandoning Naruto-kun. The brat may be annoying, but he doesn't even know her name yet. Oh, how wrong she was. Kushina sighed as she walked forward and sat down in the chairs before the Hokage desk. Her eyes flashed to Minato's picture. An expression of sorrow went across her face as she saw his picture. She turned back to Tsunade and began her story. Long story short, once the ceiling failed, I left the village with nothing to keep me here. I spent the last 18 years running from Jiraiya's spy network. I managed to settle down about 4 years ago, but once I heard of this hero of Konoha, I wanted to see him myself as well as see what this new seal looked like since the one for my son didn't work. I had heard this hero is a Jinchuriki that beat Madara. Also, I should pay my respects since my hurt was finally starting to fade, so I made my way here. I snuck into the village and here I am. She left out her meeting of the hero as she wanted to find out more about him before saying that she had upset him. Tsunade's face was one of confusion almost from the first word that had left Kushina's mouth. Failed sealing. The seal didn't fail. Hero of Konoha. Does that mean she doesn't know Naruto as that hero? What the hell is going on? She rubbed her forehead as she felt a headache coming on. She was getting too old for this shit. Which reminds me, Su-chan, why isn't Naruto's name on the monument stone? She asked with cold fury burning in her emerald orbs yet again. Naruto's heart almost burst as he heard the final key to the fact that this was definitely his mother. She had explained her actions, but he still held a small bit of resentment in she hadn't returned for 18 years. Tsunade's eyes showed her age as she sighed. Kushina, who told you the sealing failed? She asked. Kushina's eyes narrowed but she answered, Anbu, now answer my question, Su-chan. Her chakra spiked a bit but the privacy seals made it so no one but the three individuals there felt it. Tsunade's eyes narrowed at Kushina. Don't you be demanding things from me, Kushina-chan. There is much more going on than you know. It seems I must be the one to tell you. Tsunade sighed as she rubbed her temples again. The first thing that should be told to you is that the seal never failed. I don't know if Danzo's root were the ones that told you of Naruto's death or Sensei's, but either way they are both dead, so it means little now. Tsunade said with a heavy amount of tiredness in her voice. Kushina froze in her seat as possibilities ran through her mind. The only thing she could respond to that was, what? She said in a strangled voice. Tsunade turned to her with a sad look as she said, I said that the sealing never failed, Kushina-chan. Naruto has been alive all this time, here in the village. Kushina's eyes were unfocused as her mind ran what had just been told to her through her mind, he's alive. She thought incredulously. He has been alive all this time. Where is he? I need to see him. What was his life like? Is he married? He must be a lady killer by now. Oh Kami, I wasn't here his whole life. Her thoughts continued racing as thousands of implications came crashing down on her all at once. Tsunade watched, concerned as Kushina's face flitted from expression to expression with increasing frequency until, after almost 5 minutes of silence, her face settled into pure determination. Where is he? She asked. Tsunade hesitated. She could tell her about Naruto, but how would Naruto react? He had been fine with his father, but his mother was alive, and if this wasn't dealt with carefully, there would be dire consequences if she set Naruto off. He could very well attack and kill Kushina in a fit of rage. He would regret it later, but he was quite impulsive, and even with his recent changes she didn't think he should learn of this from Kushina unless the full explanation was given before he saw Kushina herself. With this in mind, she made her reply, I can't allow you to see him, Jay. She was cut off as Kushina's chakra spiked dangerously. You will tell me where my son is now, Tsunade. Kushina roared as she glared murder at her friend. I have been absent from his life for 18 years and I will not be absent any longer now that I have the chance to get to know him, she stated vehemently. Tsunade looked at Kushina with a level head, odd that her usual temper was replaced with cold hard logic as she stared down the famous red hot-blooded habanero, but she wasn't known as the slug princess of Konoha for nothing. She barely flinched as Kushina's legendary sword appeared in her hand as she leaned on her own desk with her fingers interlocked. Kushina, you need to calm down. There is a reason. Tsunade was again cut off. Calm down. Calm down. Kushina said on the verge of hysterics. I abandoned my own son for 18 years because I believed lying scum and couldn't face my past for that long. She screamed. I need to see him. I need to apologize. Does he even know of me? Of his father? She asked. As she talked her anger out, wheels began turning in her head. Who in the village could be her son? Tsunade glared at Kushina. She sent a concentrated blast of ki at her which managed to get some of Kushina's attention. I have a reason I can't let you see him, yet. Tsunade said, stressing the yet to get Kushina's full attention as Kushina's eyes narrowed at her. Tsunade began her explanation. There is much you don't know about him, and I don't believe you should be the one to inform him of your life and what you have been doing. He might not listen to it all unless someone closer to him tells him about it. Kushina's head was now running in a full sprint. The way she talks is as if I should be scared of him. He should be one of the strongest shinobi in Konoha, but I know no one who is high ranked that has blonde hair and blue-eyed except that hero guy, who is also a Jinchuriki. Her thoughts trailed off as her mouth spouted out the last of her thought. It sounds like you're afraid he might go on a rampage and kill me. Like he is. Kushina's eyes widened. Of course the hero is Naruto-kun. I need to find him. Tsunade cursed, seeing Kushina figure it out. Kushina, I am warning you, I can't let you see him. She said vehemently, but she saw Kushina coil to spring out of her window. Tsunade cursed again as she shunshined behind Kushina and sent a chop aimed to knock her out. I'm sorry. But this is for his own good, she said. Kushina suddenly froze as her senses went haywire. 1 second she was feeling the attack Tsunade had sent to her neck, and the next she was encompassed by that same overwhelming presence from before, while simultaneously feeling Tsunade's attack being stopped as he appeared in front of her. His blue eyes glaring over her head as she looked straight at his chiseled chest. She barely registered how she moved slightly closer to him as he arrived. Naruto glared at Tsunade. Now, Ba-chan. Can't have you attacking one of my precious peoples now, can I? He asked cheekily, though his glare said otherwise. I think Kushina-san and I have much to discuss. Tsunade's eyes widened. How? She started only to see Naruto was preparing to leave. I was Jiraiya's student, he said before both he and Kushina disappeared. A note floated on the residual wind left by his technique. It read, going to unseal his house. Her eyes widened and she sat back down in her chair, wondering what was going to happen. Naruto and Kushina appeared outside of a large compound. Kushina's eyes roved madly in their sockets as she tried to take in everything at once. Her mind moving at 1,000,000 miles a minute as she surveyed the landscape that now presented itself to her. She saw how they were in the clan district of the Konoha, going from what she remembered. The street suddenly became frighteningly familiar as she recognized a certain bench posted right next to the door of a compound. Her eyes widened as she looked down the street and, just as in her memories, there was a small park that she had loved to play in as a child. Her blood chilled as she turned her head back to the man standing next to her, going through some hand seals. Barrier. Kai. Naruto said as he put his hands on the floor. The air shimmered slightly before the compound was replaced with a cozy home nestled behind a wall with tall trees covering most of the front. Her eyes locked on the symbol emblazoned on the wall's door. Naruto, still having said nothing to Kushina, walked up to the door and bit his thumb, swiping his blood over the symbol, unlocking the hidden seal underneath the crest. Her eyes watered as she held further proof of this man being her son. The crest of Minato Namikaze glowed as the hidden seal was unlocked, allowing those of his or her blood within the grounds. The doors swung open as she felt her tears sting her eyes as she began to speak. Naruto kept his back to her as he said, "This is quite private, Kushina-san. Please refrain from talking until we are inside." He began to walk forward, pushing the gates open as his still crying mother stood shocked at his tone and the way he acknowledged her. Kushina-san, she thought. Her eyes came alight as a determination not unlike Naruto's flared within her, thoughts of her son wiping away most of her pain. I will make it up to you, Sochi-kun, she thought. Her tears dried as she used all of her considerable willpower to wrestle her thoughts from times with Minato to focus on regaining her son. She straightened her back as she followed her son onto their grounds and shut the gates behind them. Kushina watched as Naruto moved silently through the mighty forest that surrounded what was supposed to be Minato's clan house, starting with Naruto's birth. They had lived in Kushina's apartment until he heard about Naruto being born. He had these grounds built to accommodate his new family as he hoped it would grow. Now it was a painful reminder to what should have been, but Kushina managed to force her sadness down as she reminded herself about her son, and her determination returned full force. She expected him to lead them to the house, but he walked right past the house, heading to the backyard of the magnificent mansion Minato had constructed for his family. He had lined it with seals for only his own family so they could gain access. As such, not even Jiraiya had been in here since Minato's death. Kushina stopped for a moment, assuming he was going the wrong way, but when he made no attempt to even stagger his stride, Kushina realized he was heading elsewhere. She quickly caught up with him as the two rounded the corner of the house to see the magnificent training grounds Minato had put into the background of the grounds. Kushina's eyes narrowed in sorrow and hurt. Naruto entered a bare clearing. No trees or training dummies, no rocks or hard places, simple grass covering an expanse of field as big as the Chunin exam stadium. He reached the center and finally turned around to face his mother since the time he had figured it out at the monument stone. He glared down at her, drawing a hurt look from her, but he did not falter. Kushina shuffled under his intense scrutiny. She was determined to get him back, but she knew that she had been absent since his birth. She could do nothing if he decided to simply ignore her. Was everything you told Ba-chan true? He asked in a dead cold voice. Kushina's eyes snapped to him. You heard all that? How? I know those seals are impenetrable, she said. Naruto's eyes narrowed. How I bypassed them is none of your concern, or would you rather talk about seals instead of why you abandoned me at birth? He asked in cold fury. Kushina flinched back. You have no right to be questioning me. Answer my questions and we will see if I will talk more with you. Naruto stated in the same tone he had initially spoken to her, cold, emotionless. Kushina's eyes burst into life at that. He isn't totally adverse to me. I still have a chance. She stared directly into his eyes as she said, yes. Everything I said is true. Naruto's cold blue eyes stared into Kushina's rock-hard emerald orbs. A contest of wills battling it out as the two tried to impose their own wishes onto the other. The air grew heavy with tension and both shinobi tensed as their bodies reacted to the obvious battle. Neither moved after their initial tightening of muscles, each daring the other to make the first move. Kushina was prepared to fight for her right to know her son. The tension suddenly disappeared as mirth entered Naruto's eyes. It is a pleasure to finally meet my birth mother, he said while his visible eyes clenched slightly, signifying his mouth smiling underneath his face mask. I was told I got my attitude from you, and from what I have seen, I must say that appears true, he said in a noticeably happier voice. Kushina relaxed as the first true smile of over 18 years cracked her face in half as she said, so. Naruto's eyes lost their mirth. Do not call me your son, he said in a cold voice again. Kushina frowned. You may have given birth to me, but I have no parents. His voice carried his anger as he said he had no parents. Kushina looked stunned. What? She asked. You just called me your mother, she accused. Naruto shook his head. No, I called you my birth mother, he responded. You can't not have parents, so. Kushina was interrupted with a burst of ki, leaving her stunned at the intensity of it. I was raised in an orphanage from the time I was born to the time I was 8. After that, I took care of myself until legally becoming an adult in the village, and even took care of myself another full year before leaving on my training trip. I was raised by no one. I was given birthday presents by one person, who was a grandfather to me. I was taught to read, write, and use the bathroom by myself. I had no one to tuck me in after a long day of work. I was not congratulated while doing something good by anyone. Parents raise their kids and teach them to do all of the stuff I have taught myself how to do, all without help. His voice full of rage as he continued talking. I was not raised by you, and I will not have you trying to claim something you are not. Kushina's face showed the tremendous hurt she felt as he said this. Her heart clenched painfully in her chest as she acknowledged that everything he said was completely true. So you would have nothing to do with me? She asked steadily. Naruto's glare was replaced with a sad look. No, he said, causing Kushina's eyes to harden in determination. Not if you wish to be my mother. He finished, drawing a surprised look from Kushina. How else would you wish to have a relationship with me? She asked with curiousness in her voice. Friendship. He replied readily. Kushina's curious look was replaced with another frown. However much you may try to deny it, I am your mother, so, again she was cut off. I acknowledged what you were. Stop trying to call me son. You have not earned that. Perhaps, in time, I may see you as that, but I doubt it. The time for formative figures in my life is over. I am an adult in more ways than just legally. There is no place for a mother within my life now that I am at this stage. Think long and hard, Kushina-san. Do you wish to continue to alienate me because you wish to try to force yourself on me? His voice hard and piercing straight to her heart. Or, his voice softening as he looked at her with almost a pleading stare, would you rather start off as friends, build a relationship that may lead to what we should have had, lying bastards, or one that at least allows you interaction with the only living relative you have, and, by extension, my own? He asked. Kushina's eyes turned downward as she grew introspective. What he is saying is totally absurd. One moment he is saying I am his mother, the next he says he doesn't have any parents. What the hell happened to him? However, what he is suggesting is quite mature. It makes me proud to see him so strong and so wise. Even if his logic does seem screwed up, the way he explains our relationship would be accurate. He has every right to ignore me for what I have done. Granted, it wasn't totally my fault. I was still a coward. But the question is, can I treat him just like a friend and not be a mother? I know I was always a bit of a tomboy, but my instincts just scream at me to baby him even though he is like this. I could try though. It makes the most sense even if it pains me to acknowledge it, she thought to herself. She slowly looked up with sadness in her eyes as she said, very well, Naruto-kun. She smiled hesitantly at the familiar honorific she put behind his name. Naruto's eyes cringed slightly as he said, Arigato, Kushina-chan. He chuckled slightly at the dumbfounded look on her face. Kushina's hand pointed out at Naruto as it shook slightly. She said, You can't call me that. She said. Naruto's eyes cringed even more as his smile widened. Why not? Kushina-chan. He added to tease her. Because I'm your mother. Kushina finished in her head, coming up with no other explanation than that. She huffed as she refused to break her attempts at just being his friend. Naruto chuckled. Why do you wear that mask, Naruto-kun? She asked, making her transition in what to call him readily enough. Her curiosity had hidden her full force when she realized what had happened. Naruto cringed away. There's a real long story behind it, but basically, he trailed off while scratching the back of his head. He sighed and reached up to his mask, pulling it away from his face. His face turned sheepish as Kushina did exactly what every other woman did when seeing his face. Kawaii. Kushina said breathlessly as she saw his whisker marks combined with his angular face, and strong jawline produced quite the effect on the ladies when he had finally matured. He kept it hidden to reduce the amount of fangirls he would have. That is the reason my face is usually hidden, he said as he chuckled, allowing his slightly elongated canines to peek out from under his lip. It also leads to women not hounding me for dates just because of my looks. Dates. Kushina growled, her instincts already kicking in. Naruto's grin almost vanished, but he was pretty understanding and decided to tease her. Despite him acknowledging her as his birth mother, he had no qualms in seeing her as she is, one hot-ass able piece of woman that any man, including himself, would happily die for a chance at being in a relationship with. He was quite shameless in admitting it to himself, though he would probably never say that out loud. He didn't feel admitting it to himself would hurt him, as he would never make a move on her anyways. Does Kushina-chan not like the idea of me being on a date? He asked teasingly. Does she want me all for herself? He asked with a foxy grin on his face. Kushina's face scrunched up into a frown and slightly disgusted look until she saw Naruto's million-watt grin. Her eyes narrowed as she saw his shoulders shaking. He wants to play that way, huh? She thought to herself. Let it be known, Kushina was known as the prankster queen of hell in her youth. I ain't saying no, she said as she turned around with a evil grin on her face before shining to her apartment to take it over from Naruto. Naruto's jaw dropped as he heard his newest friend's confession. His mind turning and churning as her statement replayed in his mind. He felt his clone from his apartment being dispelled as he had set another one after Kushina left. He sighed as he heard her declaration, "My apartment, sleep in that house for now," she told his clone before dispelling it. His mind still trying to digest what she had said, Naruto trudged to his new home. Unknown to the both of them, this would lead to what no one would ever expect in their undying happiness. Naruto groaned as he rolled around in a soft and fluffy bed, soft and fluffy. He thought, this isn't my apartment. His discovery left him confused for a moment as he unnoticeably stretched his body while still lying on the very soft bed. His mind finally settled as he realized what had happened yesterday. He rolled over and allowed a few tears to escape his eyes as he grieved one last time for the loss of something he had thought he put behind him, his parents. He knew that he would never see Kushina as she wanted him to. He had been honest when he said that there was no room for someone to just try to put their own will upon his own. Which was what parents do, they imposed their own decisions on their children to lead them in the correct way. For example, they would show how it was indecent to show one's food while eating, they would explain how men and women love each other, the areas where one could be intimate and what to keep behind closed doors. Basically showing their children right from wrong. For any kid out there reading this, and there shouldn't be any of you since this is an M-rated FIC, I want to make this clear. Listen to your parents. Many times they will know better than you. You will think they don't know what they are talking about, but they do. They have lived longer than you have. I know you hear this all the time, but just do it. Trust me, it makes your life a whole lot easier. Naruto had learned all of this on his own or through the slums where he lived as a kid. No one had taught them, he had learned the hard way with no one to correct him if he did something wrong until he did it in public. Many times he would be led to believe a certain action was okay just to be told by others that it wasn't. His hands clenched as he thought of the trouble he would get into just because he had no one to teach him. He took a deep breath and let loose a shuddering sigh as his body relaxed and he allowed his indignation to be washed away. Today is a new day. No thinking about the past. Let's get to know each other, he said to himself as he nestled into the bed a bit further, but first, 5 more minutes. He smiled as his eyes closed and he snuggled into his newer, fluffier bed. Not a chance in hell. Get your out of bed. A female voice snapped only for Naruto to feel himself thrown out of his comfortable bed. Hey, he shouted indignantly as he stood from the floor showing his chiseled chest as he only slept in some pants preferring to sleep almost. His eyes immediately landed on Kushina. He had to fight the massive blush that threatened to rush to his face. He had seen his mother's face, but her body had constantly been covered by her cloak. She was dressed almost as if she wanted people to look at her. Her hair was pulled into a ponytail behind her, giving her a younger look, even though her face didn't show it. She was almost 38. I'm going on the assumption she was giving birth to Naruto at 20 since I can't find an actual age that Kushina died. As Tsunade had said, she didn't look a day over 20 with unblemished skin and her silky red hair hanging down to her back. This, however, was not what caught Naruto's attention. Kushina was wearing a skin-tight shirt and trousers. Both black with the Uzumaki swirls on her shoulders. Her pants had dark orange stripes running down the sides of them. On her feet were standard shinobi sandals. Her hands had fingerless black leather gloves finishing off her ensemble. Even all of this was not enough to grab Naruto's attention like the curves his newest friend exhibited. His eyes roved her body from top to body, heedless of the fact he knew she was his birth mother. Her DD cup S pushing against her skin-tight shirt bounced with even the slightest movement she made, showing their firmness as they followed her every move despite her age. His eyes traveled down to her toned stomach, which peeked out under her shirt before continuing on where her pants covered her slim waist until it widened back out to her firm backside. This was all attached to legs that seemingly went on forever, giving Kushina the perfect hourglass figure which any woman would strive for. It was obvious she kept in shape. Kushina herself was struck at Naruto's bare chest. Though she knew that he was her son, she couldn't help that little voice in her head that told her she had given birth to one of the hottest men on the planet. His chest rippled with energy as he breathed, each perfectly sculpted muscle moving in unison, showing how well he kept in shape. She had seen Minato's chest and many men's besides his, but Naruto's just beat them all. His six-pack standing out on his stomach leading down to the pants he had on. She noticed only one problem with his perfect chest, a scar about the size of a fist over his right lung. Her eyes roved hungrily until she snapped at herself, "Stop it. He is your Sochi." And a tiny voice couldn't help but snap back, "He doesn't see it that way." Her eyes snapped to his face as she heard this, and her slight blush went to a neon red as she realized he was checking her out. She grinned slightly as she pushed her blush down and moved her chest so it swayed back and forth, loving how his eyes were glued to it once she started moving. Though she knew it was wrong, she couldn't help but tease him. "Pervert," she finally said as she stopped moving and waited for his eyes to snap to hers. Naruto flushed a heavy red, but he didn't sputter as he stared straight at Kushina. "Yeah," he answered nonchalantly. "But what did you expect with my teachers?" he stated, grinning internally as he knew his teachers were about to get the beating of a lifetime. Kushina's eyes narrowed. "Who were your teachers?" she asked. Naruto smiled mischievously. Now, I think if we talk here we won't have anything to talk about the rest of the day," he said as he smiled a little wider at her. Kushina looked a bit confused at the sudden change of topic. She said. Naruto crossed his arms over his chest as he said, "I think we will go grab some lunch since it seems so late. Then I am going to take you to go shopping as my friend is not walking around looking like a billboard for everyone to be ogling her," he said as he waved at her outfit. "Then I have a get-together with my friends tonight and I would like to introduce you to them," he said with a cheeky grin on his face again. Kushina frowned. She hated shopping, but, looking down, she didn't want anyone ogling her. She always wore a cloak since she left Konoha and would just beat any pervert stupid enough to make a move on her. Though she was rather comfortable with Naruto, though that may be because she didn't see him as a potential lover, she couldn't see herself comfortable in front of anyone else like this. So she nodded. "On one condition," she said. Naruto looked at her suspiciously and nodded. "We get ramen for lunch and you're paying," she said with a cheeky grin. Naruto's laugh was loud as he held his sides. Kushina looked confused until Naruto said, "I definitely inherited your appetite. Ichiraku's for lunch then. Let me get dressed. Unless you'd like to continue ravishing my body with your eyes, Kushina-chan," he stated with his cheeky grin back in place. He had no problem with her looking at him like that. He knew others did it and he wasn't bothered by them. Why should he be bothered by her? Kushina, to her credit, didn't blush as she turned back around and proceeded out of the room. "Perv," she said. Naruto chuckled as he started to get ready for his day out. Kushina and Naruto walked down the streets of Konoha, drawing the stares of men and women alike. Both rubbed their bellies in a contented fashion as they proceeded to the first shop of the day. Naruto sighed happily as he let his half-lidded gaze pan around his surroundings. Though he looked like he was off guard, his sensor abilities were constantly active. He wasn't surprised to feel the Anbu Black Ops top team was following them around. He smiled slightly, letting his amusement show through as Tsunade was worried about him. He silently shook his head slightly at the direction of the captain, who was Neji, from what Naruto could feel. Kushina suddenly spoke up. "She is really worried, isn't she?" she said. Naruto turned to his mother and kept his half-lidded gaze. "Wouldn't you?" The Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, which thrives on negative feelings, is walking around with his absent mother of 18 years, he responded, not letting anyone but her hear him. Her content face was replaced with a frown as she looked downwards. I'm sorry, she said. Naruto shook his head. Sorry, I ruined the mood. I don't hold any bad feelings, let's just forget it please. He asked with a slight puppy dog pout. Kushina giggled, but it had little effect as she replied under her breath. How can you just forget that though? She asked with hesitancy in her voice. Naruto looked at her with piercing blue eyes as he responded in the same soft voice so they couldn't be overheard, simple. I forgive it. It does no good to keep a grudge against you, he admitted to Kushina's surprise. Besides, I would like to get to know my only relative, even if we should be closer than we ever get, he said with some sadness. Kushina nodded and smiled slightly as Naruto. Thank you, she said. Naruto simply nodded and the two turned and restarted their trek through Konoha. They had been walking in a comfortable silence for almost 5 minutes before Kushina suddenly asked, so can I start asking questions now? Naruto looked at her and, after a few seconds, said, I won't answer everything. There are some things in my past that no one should know about. If it doesn't infringe on that, I will answer anything you ask, he said with steel in his voice. Kushina frowned. Was your life really that bad? She asked quietly. Naruto's answer was just the barest of whispers, yes. Kushina again looked down and a tense silence fell for another 5 minutes as they continued wandering aimlessly through the village. Naruto knew where he wanted to go to get his newest friend's clothes, but he was content to let her ask questions before starting the shopping. He decided to jumpstart her slowly. I had very little during my childhood. It was a bleak and very lonely time for me. I really only had the Sandame, Tuki, and Ayame-chan for friends or people of importance. I lived in the orphanage until I was 8 years old and then I was given your old apartment as I went to the academy. As you can imagine, the teachers weren't too happy with me, so I began pranking to keep attention on myself. I have to say, my pranks were complete genius, he stated with a chuckle as Kushina finally looked up at him. One time, I painted the whole Hokage monument in plain daylight. I led the Anbu on a chase for hours before they finally caught me. His smile was wide even if Kushina could only tell because of his eyes as his face mask was back on. I failed the academy 2 times before finally passing on the 3rd time when Mizuki, one of my teachers, managed to trick me into stealing the forbidden scroll and I learned the Kage Bunshin in 2 hours. I found out about my burden and Iruka-sensei's true feelings about me. I was so happy when he passed me I couldn't stop myself and I managed to prank the Hyuga compound. He chuckled again and his smile widened as he saw Kushina stifle a giggle. Kushina took over. So who were your senseis? She asked, righteous woman fury burning in her emerald orbs. Naruto chuckled as he responded, Kakashi and Ero Sennin. He said, drawing a giggle from Kushina. Minato called him that too, she said with a small smile. Naruto's smile never wavered as he began telling her of his stories and what had happened from the D-rank missions up until he met Haku and Zabuza, gaining his true Nindo. He continued on, explaining the Chunin exams and what had happened between his fights. He enjoyed the murderous expression she held when he mentioned Orochimaru had almost killed him. He continued on, explaining his meeting with Itachi and Kisame and eventually reached how he beat Tsunade's bet and almost killed Kabuto, ending when they came back to Konoha. He didn't want to tell about Sasuke's retrieval mission just yet and the time was getting late as they had been sitting in a park they had found while they were walking around. I think we need to get you something for tonight, he said as he stood and put his hand out to her. She smiled slightly and took his hand, allowing him to pull her up and standing right next to him. He smirked as she put a hand on his chest to steady herself. She blushed slightly and stepped back as he simply turned away to hide his own small blush to lead her to the shop. Naruto and Kushina had been looking around the store for something for Kushina when Kushina suddenly disappeared behind a changing room curtain while telling Naruto, I'll be out in a minute, I want to see your full reaction to this. Naruto had rubbed his head in confusion. What did she expect him to do with this supposed outfit? Even if she was drop-dead gorgeous without needing it to be enhanced by any type of dress, he couldn't exactly tell her that as she wasn't like him, still believing that he was her, Sochi-kun. He could tell she still thought that as even though she had been acting friendly, she was rather overprotective about certain things when he was talking. It was beginning to annoy him. He sighed as he rubbed his head. This way of being friends with her wasn't working out exactly like he had planned. He would need to either push her away or simply find some way of stopping this attraction he was growing to her. He had a few girlfriends before, but no one could even compare to his mother in the beauty department. When he had first saw her, he had an unnatural urge to ask the lady out on the spot, even noticing she was an intruder. Now that he found out she was his mother, he was trying to stop his feelings going beyond friendship, but his mind wouldn't stop their thoughts. It didn't help the few times Kyubi would break through his mental barriers. All he was screaming about was plowing his mom like no tomorrow. He looked up as he heard the curtain being pushed aside, and his mind temporarily decided it would be better if it didn't function. His mouth dropped and his eyes bugged out of his head as he stared into perfection. Kushina had pulled her hair up into a slightly messy bun that had crimson locks framing her creamy face. She had chosen a long dress that was held up with two shoulder pads that rested right on her shoulders to leave the creamy white skin of her neck and shoulders bare to the air. Her skin was further exposed as the dress cupped her S, leaving some of her S exposed, clearly accentuating her larger than normal bust size. The dress fell straight down from her stomach past her legs and stopped just short of the high heels she had equipped. The color was a red that was a few shades lighter to her hair, accentuating her natural beauty perfectly. He noticed that the sides of the dress were slitted, so when she walked you would get glimpses of her creamy white thighs. All in all, perfection. Kushina wondered if she had broken her Sochi when a word escaped his lips that had her giggling. Megami. He whispered, equating her beauty to a goddess. She was pleased. Though she really shouldn't tease him, he was so fun to do so it was hard not to. Besides, she was still one smoking hot woman, and she would be damned if these women Naruto had informed her about would beat her in beauty. Even if she wasn't competing for someone's attention, it was nice to know he liked her appearance. She walked forward and put her finger under his lip, closing his mouth as she giggled. Thanks, she said. Naruto snapped out of his stupor and grinned sheepishly. I might have to beat the guys off you with a stick tonight, Kushina-chan. Kushina grinned devilishly. With that, they were set for the night. Naruto paid for the dress and, after he went home and changed, the two headed to the club to meet the rookie 12. Kushina hooked her arm into Naruto's as they walked. Naruto turned a questioning gaze to her and she simply said, "You're escorting a lady, you should always try to keep her close, Naruto-kun." She smiled up at him. Naruto shook his head and further gripped her with his arm, drawing her in closer. Kushina blushed, but the two continued oblivious to the glares of the men and women lining the road, angry at them. The men for Naruto bagging a great-looking woman. The women at Kushina for taking Konoha's #1 bachelor. Naruto walked up with Kushina still linked to his arm and smiled at the bouncer for the Club Dragon. "Evening, Jin. How's the crowd tonight?" he asked. The bouncer turned to him and smiled brightly. "Great, Naruto." His eyes settled on Kushina. "Oh ho. Finally decided to get a girlfriend, he said with a suggestive wink. "She looks like a keeper, Naruto. Don't you let any of your friends try to steal this one, okay?" He smiled at the two as he let them into the club. As they passed, Naruto whispered so only Kushina and Jin could hear him, "You know those two didn't actually love me. Don't tease me like that, Jin. Though Kushina-chan here is a keeper, of that I promise you." He smiled as he passed Jin. Kushina blushed and could only smile at Jin's even brighter smile as she disappeared into the club. Kushina leaned into Naruto as the crowd pressed on them. What was he talking about? She asked as she almost yelled in his ear. Naruto turned to her slightly as he continued walking the crowd. "These two ninjas who thought they loved me, but it was just a crush. I introduced them to some friends of mine and they eventually cheated on me with my friends," he said. Kushina almost growled. Naruto smiled. "It didn't hurt. I only went out with them because they wouldn't leave me alone. I introduced them to their perfect matches and, When they left me, it was no hard feelings as I knew it was coming, he said nonchalantly, leading to Kushina to stare at him gobsmacked. He chuckled slightly, closing her mouth much like she closed his earlier. By this time the two had reached a quieter part of the club and Naruto spotted the almost full table of the Konoha 12 with the Sand Trio and their dates. He smiled as he led Kushina toward them with a steady hand. He arrived and looked around the table as he introduced himself. "You guys will never guess what happened the other day," he said exuberantly. Around the table, people were seated with their dates. Shikamaru sat with Tamari on his left. To their left was Ino and Choji. They had gotten together after Naruto killed Madara, Ino finally admitting her long-held feelings for the big-boned and now muscled Akamichi. That's Shikamaru and Tamari. On their left is Ino and Choji. Naruto began pointing out his friends as they all stared at the beauty next to him. Next to them sat Sakura and Lee. Once Naruto had brought back Sasuke, Sakura had tried to make a relationship with him, even after confessing to Naruto, but it hadn't worked out and Naruto would have nothing to do with her beyond friendship afterwards. Lee had accepted her after she truly repented, though Naruto didn't fully believe her. Next to them was Gaara with his fiancée Matsuri. Naruto smiled as his fellow demon container finally found the love he deserved. That there is Lee and Sakura. Kushina frowned, which everyone took notice of, Gaara and his fiancée Matsuri, he said, which prompted a very bright smile at Gaara, leaving Gaara to wonder why. Then there were two open seats, obviously for Naruto and someone if he brought a date. Next to those seats were Hinata and Shino. That was an interesting pair. After Naruto had defeated Madara, he came back and told Hinata he liked her but didn't love her as he didn't know her. Before he could ask her out to a date to get to know her better, she had fled and Naruto hadn't seen her again until she was wrapped onto Shino's arm like a scarf. He had congratulated them and told Shino he would have to keep Hinata safe. Shino's response had been to let loose his bugs to show Naruto he would fight Naruto himself for her. Naruto had smiled, bowed and never bothered them again. They were great friends though. Next to them were Kiba and Shizune, an odd combination to say the least. Naruto had almost castrated Kiba when he found out his, Nei-chan, was pregnant with his first litter. Though Shizune had said they planned it and Naruto calmed down. After threatening him in the same manner as Shino, Kiba had earned Naruto's respect to keep Shizune safe. She was 3 months pregnant. Then there is Hinata and Shino, next to them is Kiba and Shizune, whom I think you remember from Ba-chan, he said. Neji and Tenten sat next to them. The two had been going out since Naruto returned from his training trip and were planning their marriage. A few months ago the Hyuga Council tried to marry Neji off to another Hyuga. Tenten had been so distraught that she had run from Neji when she found out and stumbled across Naruto training. After coaxing the story from her, Naruto had marched to the Hyuga Council and blown the doors down, his old loud personality coming back from his younger days as he protected his friend's happiness. He had threatened the Hyuga Council with fighting him in order to force Neji to leave Tenten. The council had tried to outmaneuver Naruto in politics, but he simply said, "I don't care, if you force this marriage on Neji I will kill you. Now, you have 2 days to tell Neji he is engaged to Tenten Higurashi or you will find Gamabunta sitting on your manor." He had left the council with pasty faces. Not even 5 hours later Tenten had rushed to Naruto's apartment and shown him the huge ring Neji got her. He had smiled and said, "Good for you." She had kissed him on the cheek and whispered, "Thank you," before running back to Neji and they had disappeared for the next 3 days. Then Neji and Tenten. "You remember them from today's trip," he said. Kankuro was dating some high-level kunoichi from Suna for the betterment of the Kazecage's bloodline. Finally, was Sasuke. He had reformed slightly. Though he was still arrogant, he was at least tolerable. He was only let back in on Naruto's behalf when Tsunade said he was looking to leave again. His newfound, somewhat friendship with the Rookie 12 had led to him staying and he now had 4 children with his 2 wives, Karen and Tayuya, who had both shown up a few weeks after Sasuke had returned. Both of his wives were sitting next to him. Then Kankuro, Sasuke, Karen, and Tayuya. He finished with his introductions. Sakura was the first to find her voice, jealousy tinting her voice. Though she didn't really love Naruto, she still held feelings for the blonde enigma. Naruto, who is that? She asked as the rest of the table all nodded their heads. Naruto smiled. This, he said as he pushed Kushina forward, is my long-lost cousin Kushina Uzumaki, he said with a flourish of his hand. Kushina turned a questioning gaze to him as he presented her, cousin. She asked, what? You look too young to be my mother. Besides, I don't want them grilling you about your past just yet, he responded quietly so only she could hear. Kushina nodded and turned back around, giving them a slight bow. It is a pleasure to meet you, she said. Everyone but Shizune seemed to respond. Naruto and Kushina sat down with Naruto pulling the chair out for her and her smiling coyly at him, something none of them missed. He sat down and looked at his friends. What are you all staring at? He asked with laughter in his voice as he knew they were entranced with Kushina. When did you meet her, Naruto? Shikamaru asked. Yesterday. He replied nonchalantly. She came to Konoha once. She heard my name and saw Ba-chan. I spent the whole day with her today. Turns out she is actually a cousin of mine, he said. Hinata spoke up. Then you must know who his parents are, Kushina-san. Kushina shuffled in her seat as Naruto rubbed his head sheepishly. I already know who my parents are, guys. I just haven't told you cause it isn't time. Don't worry, it will be out soon. The table nodded and the conversations broke into smaller parts. Suzune still stared at Kushina as if she saw someone rise from the grave. Kiba was starting to get worried. Where have you been, Kushina-san? Gaara asked in an impassive tone, curious about a relation to his surrogate brother. Around the world, Gaara, or should I say Kazekage-sama, she said with mirth twinkling in her eyes. Gaara simply closed his eyes. Naruto chuckled. I think you embarrassed him, he said. Not as embarrassed as I can make you, she responded, her normal exuberance coming to the surface as she was finally not the center of attention. Uncount to her, everyone was still listening into their conversation as almost all talking stopped when Naruto's eyes gained the same mirthful look hers did. All of them cringed as they saw that spark in their youth, before Naruto played a prank on someone. Try me, he said. What's your favorite position? She asked. Naruto blushed but didn't miss a beat. After last night, you have to ask, he responded. Kushina's blush was glowing as Hinata, Ino, and Temari all held blushes. Shizune was still staring somehow and Sakura looked disgusted. The clans would breed cousins, so they understood that and accepted it as ninja life. If Naruto did have with his cousin, then it wasn't really too abnormal. However, with the way they were talking, it was doubtful. Besides, Naruto didn't take someone to bed the first night he met them. Well, I was doing most of the work. I couldn't tell what you liked best as you were a bit too quick, she said. Naruto's face glowed in anger. Not going by the screams I heard, you were clenching so tight it was hard to hold on, he responded. Manwhore, she replied. Quote exclamation mark quote, he said. Both of them glared as the table stared at them like they were nuts. Suddenly, they both bust out laughing. Oh Kami, that was beautiful, Naruto said as he wiped a tear from his eye. I haven't had fun like that in a long while, Naruto-kun. Kushina said. Naruto-kun is it? Ino said with a suggestive wriggle of an eyebrow. Kushina-chan can call me anything she likes. Just as I can do the same, isn't that right, Kushi-chan? He said as he rubbed his nose into her cheek, making her smirk as he continued their little game of teasing each other. Sakura suddenly slammed her fist down on the table. That's disgusting. Stop that, she said as she glared at the two. The whole table turned to her, even Shizune, as they all popped question marks above their heads. What's disgusting? Shino asked with curiosity. Being around Hinata had led to him losing some of his impassivity. He would occasionally show emotion now. That, Sakura said, feel point at Naruto and Kushina cuddling. Naruto turned his head behind him. What? I don't see anything, he said. The table sweat dropped as Naruto smirked where only Kushina could see it. You, Sakura said as her old screeching voice came back from her younger years. You're making it sound like you ate or something. Your cousin's that's disgusting, she said.